Welcome to a community connection conversation on race, pushing for change. And we've been talking about some of the changes that we need to see happen moving forward. And something I want to talk about now with our guests is unconscious bias. How do we address that in our community?
So for me, what I would say, addressing unconscious bias, I think that started with uncomfortable conversation. A lot of times in society, we have gotten to a point to where we fear uncomfortable conversation. It's okay to hear raw emotions and respect those raw emotions. A lot of times you'll see in some of the social groups that have been created on Facebook, centering Black lives, you'll see a lot of people that are like, I don't like the way this conversation is going, or I don't like this, but there's always something good that comes out of these conversations. And what the good that comes out of it is people are able to see a different spectrum, a different dimension of how a person feel, because you finally have to listen to those raw emotions and sit there and ask yourself the question, why do this person think the way they think? And it's been a pilot in, I would say, the movement that has been created in the city of Harrisburg, specifically because you're seeing a lot of people with this unconscious bias start to reality check themselves. And I think those are the pivotal moments that make change. And you'll often hear me state to individuals that if we really want change, we have to accept uncomfortable conversation.
And so, how do we, I guess, even start those conversations? Because, like you said, they are difficult and people feel uncomfortable. They want to retract and pull away from that. But what should people be doing to start these conversations?
So one of the things that we do, I think, is starting with centering the voices that are disproportionately represented. I think when you have to listen to those voices of oppression, whether it's on a social media platform, whether it's in a town hall meeting, whether it is on these platforms such as WGAL, when you have to hear those conversations and you're looking at public comments of what others believe in and how others support and how non-supporters don't support, they eventually have to reality check themselves. They eventually have to say, why do they think the way they think? Otherwise, you'll create that dimension of individuals that will continue to think the way that they do think, and there's no room for change in a certain sector of people. But I do believe that the overall mechanism can be transformed. You can transform individuals' thinking, but they have to be in a space that reality check themselves and express to themselves, why do the person think the way that they think? And I think that these platforms, when we keep this ongoing conversations and we keep we keep centering marginalized communities at the forefront, these are the questions that you're beginning to see. This unconscious bias is beginning to unravel itself, and people are beginning to reality check their parents. I've heard so many
Mm.
individuals come to me in this time and space that are saying, yeah, I had to go and tell my mom or my dad that wasn't right, or XYZ. Like, when someone from your family and someone that you love begin to reality check themselves, because if they're begin to think for themselves and begin to see both sides of oppression and what it exists to be, they begin to go home and expand those thoughts and the knowledge that they have received to their family. And once you get inside of the family structure, real change exists there, because if
Yeah.
you're not going to throw away someone that's your family, you're going to try to understand them, because that's the person that you love. They have your heart.
And that reality check that Brent is talking about needs to be expansive into organizations, corporations, agencies, and businesses. One of the things that we did at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission was we brought in the Anti Defamation League to do a training for us. We needed to have a training on implicit, explicit, and overall unconscious bias. We all come to the context with a form of prejudice, with a form of bigotry, with a form of discrimination. But I also think that within business, the business framework, when they're talking about diversity and inclusion, we need to really expand that. There needs to be a paradigm shift where we're really talking about justice and equity. When we're talking about unconscious bias, that some police officers come to context with. I push back against that narrative because the unconscious bias seems to be you can take Dylan Roof, Ted Bundy, Timothy McVeigh alive, but then Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, they died. So I think what police departments need is not unconscious bias training. They need anti-racism training to get to the framework and the underpinnings of white supremacist ideology that oftentimes renders Black bodies under suspicion and surveillance.
I wonder, Chad, if you, because I feel the same way, that it's important to deal with people's individual perceptions and how we're raised and socialized, but it's more important to see change happen in structures and accountability and that sort of thing. And so, you know, with policing, I don't know what you're going to do about bias, but you can certainly do something about rules of engagement. What are the standards for interacting with other people? What are the standards for accountability? Because, you know, there are two ways to change. One is from the inside, but one is when there's pressure from the outside. And, you know, I think the second one is usually the quicker way to get social change.
And I think we encourage both.
Go ahead,
Chad.
No, go ahead.
I do think we encourage both that individual accountability, because you have the individual must start working on themselves. And yes, as you said, the institutional pressure makes that mandatory, or should make that mandatory. And it's going to be the continuous community pressure to make sure that the government and the businesses keep that pressure on their own employees. But it really does start in the home. It does start with the individual, because it's unconscious, but because it's ingrained. It's from the cartoons, it's from the media, you know, from the birth of the nation since 1915, characterizing Black men as rapists, wanting to conquer white women, equating them to animalistic. It's the constant false narrative of Black on Black crime, which is a false narrative. It's just crime. That's like we don't say white on white crime, you know. So it's the constant uplifting Black people as criminals. So then when a person goes into an elevator with a Black person, a white person goes into an elevator with a Black person, they don't know why they clutch their purse. You know, when a Black person walks close to a white person's car, they may not understand why they lock their door. And they would never say they're racist. They would never say it's because he's Black or she's Black, because they would quite often say, oh, I support liberal things. I support diversity. I support inclusion. And, you know, so we do have to deal with what has been ingrained in them through the media, through the perceptions, and yes, have those hard conversations and stop the communications that say we've heard enough. Haven't we already dealt with this? Why are we dealing with this again? So if it's time to yet say it again, and we say it again without feeling pressure ourselves to be quiet. And yes, we need to empower those who are predominantly in white communities who hear those jokes in predominantly white circles and are strengthened enough to say, you know, that's not funny. I think that's offensive, even though there's not a Black or brown person here or what other protected class here. I don't think we should say that. So as we each check ourselves and check each other, then accountability grows and it becomes more conscious of what's acceptable and what's offensive.
All right, and with that, we're going to take a quick break, and hopefully we can address some of the things that we can do moving forward to, you know, really get that change going and just become more of an inclusive community. We'll be right back.